Lya, thank you so much for being here today. We're super grateful to get to interview you. I would love if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, Courtney. Yeah, my name's Lya Badgley. I am an author, and I have had a very lucky and wonderful life. I've been able to do lots of things, and I draw on my personal experience to influence my stories. So I was born in Myanmar, which is a country in Southeast Asia. I moved to the Pacific Northwest in the 80s and became part of the Seattle arts and music scene. In the 90s, I actually opened a restaurant in Yangon, Myanmar, and was involved in all different kinds of things. I also lived in Cambodia, where I worked for Cornell University as director of an archival project at Tuol Sleng Museum of Genocide, bringing war criminals to justice. I've been an elected city council member, a dedicated environmental activist. I'm just basically my sort of vibe is that, you know, you live long enough, you take risks, and you get to do interesting things. So that's a little bit about me.
Amazing. That's really unique. I love it. What is your book about?
So my book, The Foreigner's Confession, it was released in February of, let's see, what year are we? 2022, and it is set in Cambodia. It's a dual timeline modern historical fiction, in that one of the timelines is set in the 1970s and the other timeline is set in the 1990s. And for anyone who, you know, a lot of people don't know very much about Cambodia or even where it is. Cambodia, but when I mentioned to people, hey, you remember the Vietnam War, you know, people have seen lots of movies or maybe read books about that conflict. And the country right next door, Cambodia, was also really impacted by that conflict or that war. And so my book deep dives a little bit into that.
Love that. What inspired you to write your book?
Well, a couple of things. I actually lived and worked in Cambodia at a former prison for a group called the Khmer Rouge, who were dedicated communists who wanted to create a whole new world in their country. And in the process, they did so many horrible things and killed so many people. If anyone has ever, you know, seen the movie The Killing Fields, it's sort of about that. So my actual work when I lived in Cambodia was to oversee a local staff who were microfilming, taking pictures. Mind you, this was in the 90s, so there wasn't, you know, digital stuff then. It was all analog. So we were actually microfilming the documents that were left over when that prison was shut down. And so that included confessions, as well as propaganda materials and photograph negatives and things like that. So working there, so my book is not my story. It's not a memoir. Though I drew from that experience to sort of create an authentic, shall we say, environment. So when readers read my book, it will be as if they visited Cambodia, and they'll feel the warmth and eat the food and know a little bit of the history that happened there. The story is, like I said, it's dual timeline, two different women, European women, one's American, one's European, and they never actually meet. They're 30 years apart, or is it 20 years? And but their lives become entwined in this really mysterious sort of woo-woo way that involves a portrait. And how can the more modern woman have a portrait painted that looks exactly like her of a woman she's never met? And so their lives become really entwined. And it's ultimately a story of transformation and transcendence. My American protagonist had a horrible accident. She has an amputation, and so she goes to Cambodia to help victims of landmines, and basically sort of discovers her power and strength in that unusual and very, very different culture that she finds herself in.
Love that. That's amazing. When you were writing your book, who were you thinking of when it comes to who the book is for?
I would say that I mean, obviously, I've done marketing research about who my ideal reader is. So my ideal reader is someone who, you know, is knowledgeable about the bigger world, who probably has traveled internationally, but I think realistically, my ideal reader is someone who wants to learn, who is curious about the world, and likes a good story about strong women overcoming life-changing odds.
Amazing. How long have you been writing and what made you really start?
So I've been writing quite a long time. I started, as I mentioned earlier, I got involved in the Seattle music scene in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And so I started writing song lyrics. And song lyrics are a little bit sort of like poetry. And then I had health issues and wasn't able to continue um, uh, performing and touring with my band. So the song lyrics shifted more into poetry, and then the poetry got longer and longer. And now I find myself, writing prose. It's a great thing to do when you get older, like me. This is kind of maybe my, later in life chapter. I've had these marvelous experiences, and now I can sit in my comfortable home and draw and write based on what my life has been like.
Love that. What is your schedule like when you are writing a book?
So there's nothing like a pandemic to help you get a book written. I had started the first project, another project before this one that we're talking about now, The Foreigner's Confession. And I had sent it out, what's called querying, to try and find an agent and then a publisher. And that wasn't as successful as I'd hoped it would be. So in the meantime, while I was doing that, I started writing The Foreigner's Confession, and lo and behold, we were all in lockdown and there was nothing to do except write. So I wrote the book fairly quickly, and then decided to, based on my experience with querying, to self-publish. So The Foreigner's Confession is self-published. And so it happened pretty quickly. It happened in about 2 years, which I know sounds like a long time, but really is a short time in an author's sort of timeline.
Love that. What do you need in your writing space to help you stay focused?
A door that closes. So my husband and no one's coming to bother me. I need time. I need music. I create playlists for the different novels that I'm working on at any given time. Music definitely is a strong motivator for many of us. I work best in the morning, so I need a good night's sleep, a big, strong cup of coffee, and a playlist and my computer, and I'm good to go.
Love that. What is your favorite writing snack or drink?
Well, I mentioned coffee. While I'm writing, probably nothing, because when it gets going, I'm in the country where I'm writing. So Foreigner's Confession, set in Cambodia. The next book that's coming out is set in Myanmar. My third book that I'm starting to write now is set in Bosnia. So I am in those countries while I'm writing the book. So I'm not really thinking about food or drink. So, and then, 2 hours, 3 hours will go by and I'll look up and go, oops, it's time to stretch. It's time to drink some water. So.
Love it. What type of books do you personally enjoy reading?
Um, when I first started reading a lot, I really liked genre fiction, like thrillers, mysteries, suspense, and so my books probably are under the sort of suspense, that's where you might find it in a bookstore. But personally, I read literary fiction because I uh, appreciate language. I appreciate poetic language, and I try to put that into my writing. But um, I my stories are really plot driven, so literary fiction is less plot driven. So I like plot driven literary fiction, and so hopefully readers will know what I mean by that. That's what I like to read.
Love it. Are there any books or authors that inspired you to become a writer?
Gosh, all of them. I think that as readers we read. People read for different reasons: escape, inspiration, motivation. Um, I probably started, at a very, very young age, reading. Uh, Appropriate stuff. I remember we traveled around when I was little. I throughout all of my schooling, I was never in one place more than a few years. So libraries and librarians were my safe, happy place, and safe adults. And I just read a lot as a child, and that just extended into my adulthood. I think that you'll find that most writers are avid readers, or they should be to be good writers.
Love that. What type of books did you grow up reading? Did you have an all-time favorite?
Ollie. I don't know that I can say. I think that the I grew up. Yes, so a fairy tale written by James Thurber long, long, long ago, actually before I was born, called The 13 Clocks, and it's a fairy tale for grown-ups almost. But I grew up with that book, and I remember my mother had a first edition copy of it, and the the illustrations and the how to say the dark quality to it. It was a little spooky. It was a little funny, in this dark, tragic way that I I'm just sort of having this epiphany of understanding right now that really sort of set the course for the kinds of books I like, and the way that I write, which is there's evil in all of us, and it just takes the right set of circumstances to bring it out. And so, how do we fight that within ourselves?
Love that. On the opposite side of that, now as an adult, what are your favorite series or authors that if they come out with something, you automatically grab it?
First one that comes to mind is a writer by the name of Lawrence Osborne. He whatever he writes, I automatically uh, pre-order it. There's a Vietnamese writer, American of Vietnamese descent. His name is Viet Nguyen, who he won the Pulitzer. His he is someone who I read everything. Liska Jacobs is an American writer. She lives in Germany right now. I love her sort of sensory overload, sardonic sort of wit of what she writes. So there are a lot of writers that I like. And those are just who came to mind right now. I wasn't prepared for a list, but if you give me a minute, a lot more will bubble up.
Love it. What would you tell someone just starting out with reading again?
Reading again? You mean they used to read and then they stopped, or reading again? Um, I would say, experiment with different kinds of genres. I used to love when Patricia Cornwell, back in the early, was it in the 90s or 80s, wrote these, what we now call sort of medical CSI sort of type things that subsequently became so popular. And she was one of the first that did that. And I remember reading those, and then that sort of leading to other sort of in that genre. So if readers were to just go to your local library and look at the mystery section, the romance section, the fantasy section, and just grab a book, and you can tell within the first 10 pages whether you jive with it or not, and then find your genre and then just start reading like crazy.
Love that. On the opposite side of that, what would you tell someone just starting to write their own book?
For in regards to sort of inspirational type stuff, or I mean, definitely do all the workshops, do all the work, try to better yourself as a writer. I think it was Stephen King said that, to be a good writer, you need to read and you need to write. So, keeping a journal or writing short stories, or definitely finding a critique group and workshops. The upside of the pandemic was that, and here we are on Zoom, you and I wouldn't be able to come where you are, or you wouldn't be able to come where I am and have this conversation. But now Zoom is everywhere, and it wasn't even just 4 years ago. It was a unique tool. So aspiring writers and established writers can attend workshops from all over the world and learn craft, basic skills, and then you just practice it. A writer cannot, and I'm going to use a metaphor here, a writer or let's say a musician does not pick up a violin and know how to play Clair de Lune beautifully. They have to practice at that violin to create a beautiful bit of music. The same with writing. You just have to practice a lot.
Love that. What's one thing that people are generally surprised to find out about you?
Everything. All the weird stuff I've done. I opened a restaurant in Yangon, Myanmar. Then it was called Rangoon, Burma, and the restaurant is still there all these years later. And not that I own it, but that always, people scratch their head because food figures prominently in in all of my stories, and different recipes from the local regions. And it's like, hey, I used to own a restaurant. So there you go.
Amazing. Is there anything you would like to say or add?
I think I would like to mention that I do have another book coming out that is, surprise, surprise, about an American woman who goes to then called Burma to open a restaurant. So you write what you know, right? Again, it's not my story, but it is a story influenced by my experience. And so this book is about that, and this woman gets in over her head and gets involved in a jewelry heist, or a ruby heist, and so it's all kind of high stakes, a little bit of a thriller, and the working title right now is called The Ruby Kitchen. That might change by the time that this airs, but hopefully we can touch base about it when that happens. But I encourage people to look for Foreigner's Confession, and then The Ruby Kitchen. And then my third book, which is I'm starting to write right now, is going to be set in Bosnia during the wartime there.
Amazing. Where's the best place for readers to find your book? I know some readers love signed copies. Is that an option, and the best place to connect with you?
I think the best way to connect with me is through my website or on social media. So I'm on Instagram and Facebook, and then I do have the website. Presumably, you'll share that within the notes, all that contact information. And people are welcome to reach out to me directly. As far as signed books, or where to buy the books, of course there's Amazon. I support independent bookstores. This week is National Independent Bookstore Week. So I will be within my county, the area where I live, which is in Washington State. There will be, I'll be at several different independent bookstores signing books. So if any of your or I guess your listeners won't listen to this in time. Anyway, never mind. I'll backtrack here. So probably on all the platforms. So buying them online. I certainly Amazon, but you can find me maybe at your local bookstore, wherever you live. If you go in and ask for the title, 90% chance they can order it for you. So because it's available through all of the ways you can find my book.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. We're so grateful we got to interview you. We will be sure to drop those links in the show notes. That way everyone can find you. And again, thank you so much.